Hi there, Mike Shope with Adam Krautwurst for the Deep End tonight, April 11th, 2023. I'll tell you, I'll give you what's the deep end when you can't imagine anyone in the world having more Chigoziem Okonkwo shares than you. I mean, I feel like I might be at the new world record for that, and we're about to possibly add one more. Playing with a partner in one draft where we're up, I want to show you that board and talk about like the challenges and the benefits to having a partner in a fantasy draft. Learned a few things and could learn a few more on that one. We'll talk a lot about quarterbacks tonight, kind of run down the list. Where is the value? And is it true that as a high volume player, high stakes player, somebody you consider, maybe you consider yourself pretty knowledgeable at this? Are we drafting? Do we feel like we need to be drafting quarterbacks earlier? Talk a little bit about the NFL draft, of course, as well, with it being just over 2 weeks away. Here come the Sharks, Mike and Adam in the deep end. Welcome. You are draft guy, but
yes,
you have partners sometimes, right? I mean, there's a lot of money flying around. Sometimes you like to have somebody who can share the cost with you.
Oh yeah. When you're doing it, plus it's fun. When you're doing high stakes stuff, that's always fun to get some more input for sure. Like you said, to cut some of the cost down. I remember it's fun when you do these. We'll do some main events and stuff as it gets closer to the season, and it's always like, hey, is it still high stakes if 4 guys are splitting a $1,500 entry? But when you're doing 10 of them, absolutely. So, and we'll get our fair share of high stakes stuff, the 3Ks, the 5Ks, all that stuff. But yeah, of course, it's fun to do that with partners. In fact, I had one of my more successful drafts ever when I was became a top 5 in the main event 2 or 3 years ago in the FFPC main event, top 5 finish with a partner. So, if you can surround yourself with people that you trust, people that, have challenge you to dig a little deeper and to think a little different, it can certainly help.
It feels good to split the cost and maybe less good to split the winnings. At the other end of it, right. If you do well, like, oh, I won $7,000. Wait, actually, no, I won half of that and then taxes, and it's a very different thrill. Feels good to win, but, it goes both ways. You mentioned the main event. Our friends who have, and it's just going to sound crazy to anybody who doesn't know this, but the same guys won the main event at the FFPC each of the last 2 years, and they're friends of ours. They live in Buffalo. I live north of Buffalo. Adam's in Rochester. And so we know, and I'm sure I speak for you when I say we respect those guys and their game very much. And I think in conversations we've had, I think maybe each of them, Adam, has said that they like that they are 3 because there's always a tiebreaker. In fact, the first year when they won, I think if I remember right, they did 4 teams. Nick is often watching, so he might tell us. They did 4 teams where each guy was sort of in the captain's seat in one. And then on the 4th one, they just figured it out, maybe 2-1 carried, like that. So how do you handle it? And I want to answer this for myself when you're done, when it's just you and someone else and it's clear you're on a different page with them.
Yeah. I do like the idea of an odd amount. 3 is very, very nice to obviously break the tie, especially when you trust the other 2 guys. Like, my whole thing is, if I feel, because this kind of goes back to like, we don't know anything. Nobody knows anything, right? All the NFL GMs, they're going to do this draft in a couple of weeks. They don't know anything either. So, you can just tell, from the history of how they do, there's more misses than there are hits. So I just want to know that my partner, whether it's 2 partners, 1 partner, is putting in as much work as I am. If they're putting in the work and they're trusting the same kind of sources that I trust and the same type of analytics that I'm looking at, then I have zero problem kind of giving them a take on a player or a pick or whatever. Where I struggle is if I feel like my partner or partners are kind of just along for the ride, but then they want to have, the same amount of say as the rest of us when they're not really as invested mentally or emotionally or whatever. And they're just kind of in it for the money. So that's kind of where I struggle with that part. As long as everyone's in it with the same amount of effort, I love that. The other thing I will say is I'm better with 3 than I am with 2. And I feel like I can't give my best when I'm with 2 because I feel like I want to always concede to my partner. Like if they're really adamant about something, I'm like, you know what? I'm in 9 million drafts. Like if this is what you want, even if I hate, like I'll push back a little bit. And you and I have done a ton of these together, and we'll do some more this summer. And it's kind of a process where you really have to trust the person that you're working with. But I give a lot more than I do, than I would normally do in like life in general. Right. Like, so I feel like I can't give my 100% best because I don't want to offend the person or upset the person. But and I think it depends on who it is too. Like if it's a brand new partnership, it's different than if you've been doing it. Like the team that we came in top 5 in the main event, FFPC, we've been friends for 15 years. And there was actually a point, I've told the story before, and you've actually met these partners.
Yep.
We almost were buying each other's shares out during the season because we were just going to blows over, not over picks. The draft was fine, but over, what players to pick up and what players to drop. It was ugly. It was an ugly season, but it ended up working out. Thank you, Lamar Jackson and Christian McCaffrey. But so yeah, it can be tough. It can be emotional. But I think if I trust that the partners are putting in the work that it's called for, that I'm fine conceding.
Work is interesting, that word, like the effort, that's absolutely necessary. I agree. Like you don't want to be really stuck in a partnership with somebody that just kind of wants to ride along and isn't really grinding at it. I mean, that's what we love about it. So you want to be with people who are like you in that way. They're also, though, beyond that, I think for me at least, sort of how you think needs to be compatible. Like a basic similarity in what are we looking for here. Not everybody is going to understand value to the same extent or agree on those things. So you have to have sort of an agreement, I think, all right, so what are we looking for? What are we trying to build? These kinds of things. And part of that can be challenging is if we're, at least for me anyway, for my taste, is if your partner is reacting too much to like what just happened or something. This is more during the season for lineups and waivers, like you said about your groups. Like, just, hey, this tight end had 2 touchdowns, but he had 2 targets and we really don't care about that. Sort of the same kind of basic understanding of what works and what's sticky, as they say, those kinds of things. What's good about partnerships, I mean, not just saving money and also sort of expanding a friendship, but I get different guys that way. And I think maybe that's what you said. Like when you and I did Pros versus Joes or something last year, just take it. You want Kareem Hunt? You can have Kareem Hunt, like, and maybe in the back of your mind is, I'm not drafting this guy in any of my stuff. I know I'm always like Jacobs is somebody that I'm still really not warm to. And I'm going to show you a board in a minute where a friend and I are drafting together and he got to Jacobs. You know what? Take it. Let's do it. Because I know I'm getting a share of him that I wouldn't be having if it were just me on my own. So, I mean, that's good. That variety, you want to end up there. You want to end up with different players that way. And then I think the last part, and this is an example, this Jacobs point is an example of that. It's presumably a friend, and you got to be able to read each other so that you know when to give in. Like this is somebody I really want. Here's my argument, or vice versa. And I feel like Louis G and I have been really successful at that, where, we're almost never telling each other no, but you can just see it in your friend's face when you know them well enough. You just know what it looks like. And he does not want this guy. And there's almost always another idea that works. So some of this stuff is pretty self-evident, but I feel like it's good to talk about because we're talking about high stakes and the money gets bigger, it seems, every year. The $77 leagues are now $100 leagues, and up it goes. And, like anybody, you want to sort of be in that game, but sometimes it's tough to afford it, especially when you're playing a lot. So it's good to know the rules, even with it, when it is a close friend. It's good to agree on terms, and have an understanding for what you're trying to do before you spend.
Oh yeah. And the fun thing about having partners too, especially if you do slow drafts, you just have stories of from the season of like, you can go back and look at text messages and you can look at emails and where you were bantering over certain players and good and bad stories. Like I was doing a main event 2 years ago with two other partners. It was a slow draft, and we were on the clock, and you're a part of all of these somehow, but I'm waiting to make the pick, and the two guys are actually driving up to meet us, and they just pulled the trigger in the car on a player that I never would have picked, and I was going to pound the table for Cooper Kupp, and with the other player that we took, was not Cooper Kupp from 2 years ago. So they just made the pick. I think it was Miles Sanders. Oh gosh. And so that's like a thing that it's funny. I'll look back, like I'll never forget it. And then there's flip side stuff where, you make the right decisions. And so just because you agree doesn't mean you're always right. Like last year. So I didn't know Andrew Schellenberg very well, GOAT District guy, really, really smart guy. We teamed up for a main event last year, and we were on the same page with every single pick. Great time, had a great banter with him. I thought it was great. And our team stunk. It was terrible. Injuries and whatever, but like it was probably my worst main event all season. Now that's no knock on Andrew. He's excellent. But it's just because you agree doesn't mean it's going to be a good team. So it's just fun to go back and look at stuff like that. I don't know if you ever read the book, Mike. I'm a big Red Sox fan. Stephen King wrote a book. He's a big Red Sox fan. Him and a buddy of his, they basically compiled a book of all their emails and texts going back and forth during the Red Sox World Series run in 2003 when they finally won it. It's just as a Red Sox fan, it's cool to go back and watch like from the beginning of the year, like how the season kind of broke down and developed. So it's cool when you can make a lot of money with a friend and kind of go back and look at those texts and stuff.
Stephen King has gotten into writing. That's interesting.
Yeah, I believe that's right. Big podcast guy, I heard. Big podcast guy.
04 Red Sox. All right. Well, here's the board of this $125 best ball FFPC draft that my friend Mark and I are sharing a team in, and we can pull that up, Adam, when you're ready. There it is. We are team 2, so we are up on the clock, some people say.
Oh, wow. OTC?
And, pardon?
OTC?
If you prefer. Chase at 102 was because this is often how I kind of do it. Like, what do I think is coming around the next time? And when you're on the ends, you can have a better feel for that based on ADP than if you're in the middle. If you're in the middle, you kind of do anything you want as long as you get to where you need to be by the end. But on the ends, you can't necessarily be as flexible. So Breece Hall, sorry for that asterisk. That was my friend bailing me out super late at night after I'd fallen asleep.
Oh, wow.
We made the pick from Hall in the queue. Use that queue so that if you don't see each other all the time, you at least are submitting your preferences, your recommendations to your partner. And I think, this tournament, this is a tournament where stacking, I think, is vital. Herbert and Keenan Allen was fairly easy there. Mike Williams as a backup in round 5. Deshaun Watson, we've been hoping to put him. We were hoping for Njoku. That didn't work. Elijah Moore went early in this draft. We might want to figure out a plan for Watson going forward. But Lockett is the one I want to use to talk about just for a minute, because you have Smith and Jigba on the board in round 7, whose ADP is above Lockett. We talked about Brandon Ayuk as well, who ends up going around later, different positions, and really had a good conversation, my partner and I, about just sort of, are we done at quarterback? Maybe. So then we don't have to worry about stacking as much. Who's pretty safe? All the different categories, so to speak, of what you're looking for. We ended up on Lockett over Smith and Jigba because I wanted to put 1 point anyway, a different rookie or two with Herbert based on how I see the draft going in a couple of weeks. So in this case, thinking that Smith and Jigba wouldn't make it to the Chargers, we'll see if I'm right. We decided to take, I guess, more of a sure thing than Lockett. Never know. Just because he's a rookie doesn't mean he won't be great. So communication and just a philosophical, enough of an agreement to be able to get along with your buddy as you're working.
Yeah, no, I like that. And the way that you're talking about, like, hey, taking my quarterbacks and then looking to grab some of these rookie receivers before the draft, like that's why we're doing these drafts now, right? Is to to kind of, get a feel for the room, for the ADP, and to also grab those rookies, right? And so an interesting way to do that is and I know you were doing that last year. You were putting me onto that, like, hey, let's take our quarterbacks based on maybe them getting some rookies and us targeting those rookies. I think you did that with the Packers a bunch last year, with Aaron Rodgers and then picking some rookie receivers, hoping that they would land there and getting some cheap stacks that way. So
Yeah.
I like that way. Some people might say it's a little early for two quarterbacks in a non-super flex, but with
It
Watson,
is.
sure, it is. But again, it is best ball too, and now there's something to be said about kind of ignoring the position for the rest of the draft and being able to build those stacks. And yeah, I mean, I think that's fine. That's
what my preference is to do with this team. We're going to need tight ends, running backs. We have a long way to go at other positions. So I see us, and I like that. For me, this is a good offset to other teams I've drafted where I don't see necessarily any of the rookies in the fold. And then there are the other veterans, and we'll get to this in just a minute. We start looking at the quarterback rankings, what kind of value they have when you feel like you might be a little light, but you're staring at Mayfield or Tannehill, and I don't know, like what exactly is that value? We'll dive into the rankings in just a moment, but first, here on the deep end, Mike Shope and Adam Krautwurst, a word from our sponsor.
People always ask me, hey, what is the World Series of fantasy or the Super Bowl of fantasy football? And it's easy. It's the FFPC, the Fantasy Football Players Championship. It's a $6 million prize pool. And they've had their Never Too Early Best Ball leagues cranking since February. And so the FFPC is the answer to so many questions. Hey, where's the best place to get a Dynasty Orphan? Well, you can adopt a Dynasty Orphan at the FFPC. That's why we partner with them. If you want to play fantasy football for low, medium, high stakes, seasonal, best ball, dynasty, go to the FFPC. And don't forget, promo code Underworld to get you $25 off your first team. $25 off your first team, no matter what team it is, no matter what format it is, at the FFPC. Go do it.
Mike and Adam back in the deep end. Speaking of the FFPC, I purchased, as they call it, an Orphan Dynasty team today.
Ooh.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Well, what do you look for? The prices are all over the place based on FFPC's assessment of what the assets look like. And this is the second or third one of these I've done this year. Like if I see 3 or 4, 2 are very similar, by the way. 2 of these teams I picked up are very similar. 3 or 4 young assets that I like. And those teams are often out of the first round, but they're 2 or 3 picks in the second and or third rounds. I'll take a shot at that. And I want to see, I haven't been really successful this offseason at remaking some of my dynasty rosters, but I'd like to try. And so enough assets to make it worthwhile, enough of a discount too. And, you go from there. So there it is. Today we have a new team in the family.
Do you ever, when you look for orphans, do you ever go in looking for this, like a specific player?
Not exactly, but I know when I see a team that has a couple that I'm going to, take a harder look. You don't know, unless there's some other way of finding out that I can't think of. You don't know who else is in the league. And that's kind of a fun moment where you pay for the team and then you get to see who else is in the league. You're sort of going to class for the first day and you can see who else is in your class,
That's
something
right.
like that. So this one today didn't happen to be any familiar names, but so be it. One guy offered me 6 trades in an hour.
Wow.
Within the first hour of joining the league very early this morning. That's aggressive.
Was his name Louis G? Is that who it was or no?
Oddly, no. Surprisingly, no. But very aggressive player right away. Careful out there. Don't make the wrong impression.
Yes, right, that's right. Don't be too
we like that.
Right.
We like that you're eager. We
like the
Hopefully
chase. We like the chase over here.
Yeah. Just he's buddy.
Imprinting.
Okay.
He's imprinting.
He's hoping to be. Sometimes that goes awry. All right. Available here, I've got it if you want to put it up on the screen, Adam, is the FFPC rankings at quarterback from Player Profiler. So you're going to have on this board the points per game and then projected for 2023. But in that third column on the right, these won't be in that order. They're not according to the rankings necessarily. The ADP at FFPC, the best ball draft we just talked about, and others like it. So you see, in this case, Lamar Jackson is fourth in the rankings. I have to admit, I don't know if they just adjusted these based on the Beckham signing. They may have, but he is not quarterback 4 in those drafts. You're talking about, what does that say, 69.1, so 6.9 is what that is, almost the 7th round. The big question, I think, quarterback draft strategy, Mahomes, Allen, Hurts. We can stop there. You can throw in one or two other guys if you want. How important is it for you, Adam, this year and in other years? Like, how has it changed, if it has, to get one of those quarterbacks? You know, basically in any format, in Superflex, you're at the mercy of your draft position. But say in these best ball drafts or upcoming main event, are you shopping for Mahomes, Allen, Hurts, that class of player?
You know, I'm usually not, and I don't think that's changed much this year. But again, from Superflex and you know, regular one quarterback leagues, that does change a lot. So like if I'm in a Superflex, and we can show some drafts here coming up if you want in a couple minutes here, that you know, getting one of those top guys, and it doesn't even have to be like a specific one, like any one of the top, you know, you can have your own tier. For me, it probably ends at like the Joe Burrow, you know, QB 7-ish. There's probably like 6 or 7 quarterbacks that I would take as my QB1 in a super flex that I feel comfortable with, you know. And so I think in a super flex, there's a much different strategy involved than a single quarterback league. A single quarterback league, I'm still okay with waiting. I feel like the success of a lot of the high stakes, you know, leagues or the high stakes events is finding those quarterbacks you can get in the later rounds 9, 10, 11, 12. Think back to, you know, the year that I was top 5, it was Lamar Jackson carried us in the, you know, 9th, 10th, 11th round, wherever we took him in there. It's Josh Allen, that first or second year in that range. It's Patrick Mahomes in that range. It's Jalen Hurts a little bit. He was going a little bit higher than that last year, but it's that type of kind of quarterback I'm looking for, kind of a dual threat guy that I can get as QB, you know, 10, 11, 12. It was Trey Lance, right? It's who guy we were looking at in that kind of that same range. So that's kind of what I'm looking to do in a single quarterback league, is find that guy. But it might change a little bit this year because quarterbacks are being drafted higher, right? We've got, you know, Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen are going. They're kind of interchangeable at the 2. Allen and Hurts and Mahomes. Allen, Hurts, and Mahomes. All 3 of them have kind of been. You can see any one of them going as the 101 for quarterbacks, depending on how you want to stack them and stuff like that. So that pushes everybody up. So maybe that 10th round quarterback that you were taking last year, the year before that, you might have to push them up to the 8th round. So that's kind of the way I'm looking at it. The interesting thing, though, too, that you'll find in a single quarterback league is the safety of taking that stud quarterback early. And in the sense that, like, stud quarterbacks generally don't bust outside of injury. And just having a safety of like that 3rd or 4th round pick that you might hit, you might miss. You take like Allen, Mahomes, Hurts, you know, those guys aren't going to bust outside of injury, right? Like the talent around them's too good in the Hurts case, the rushing upside of Allen. Mahomes is an all-time great. Those guys aren't going to bust. Whereas, you know, you get to that 3-4 turn for running backs, tight ends, receivers, there's a plethora of things that can happen. Injuries to them, injuries to the quarterback on their team can severely affect them. You know, new offensive coordinators, all types of stuff. So the bust rate is much higher at the other skill positions than it is the quarterback. So there is something to be said about taking in a single quarterback league, taking that quarterback a little bit earlier. But I think I'm going to still try to push the limit on that this year. And, you know, maybe get a Deshaun Watson later. I still want that dual threat guy. Kyler Murray may be a guy that I take, that I push the envelope on and look forward to that fantasy playoff, or if he can come back. But for him in particular, I want to see what they do in the draft.
While you're riffing on some of these guys kind of in that range or a little above, what are your thoughts on Trevor Lawrence?
Yeah, I love Trevor Lawrence. I was super high on him last year. I think a lot of people were. They just wanted to see, right? We wanted to kind of give him that rookie season off because the coach was such a disaster in that offense. Man, they're adding a ton of weapons there. I love Trevor Lawrence. Again, he didn't even run as much as he could have last year. Still has more rushing upside. So there's another good example of a guy that's got a little bit of that sneaky rushing upside there that absolutely, like, I feel comfortable with him. I like him over Dak, over Russ, over Deshaun Watson, although they did just obviously add another receiver there. But yeah, I like him. I just think he's safer than Deshaun. Deshaun was so bad last year. Like, it just wasn't good. Could say it was rust, fine. I'm sure I'll have some shares of Deshaun Watson, but I do like Trevor Lawrence as the QB8.
Interesting. It's only touchdowns, but he did tie for the team lead in rushing touchdowns with Travis Etienne last year. Maybe the sky's the limit for the passing game, and receivers are good enough. I like Lawrence too. You know, I was listening to First Class Fantasy, Billy and Theo, as I know we all were.
Yep.
And they did a draft just like the one I just showed. And they got a question about this, about, you know, when want to dive in for the early quarterbacks. And I think it was Billy. Apologies if it was Theo. I think it was Billy who took the question first. And he said, you know, it's not, paraphrasing, it's not my favorite thing to do, but if you got to make sure you get some shares of those guys, you know, Mahomes, Allen, Hurts, you want to have teams somewhere with those players on them. And I thought that was a key point. You know, it's a little bit like the earlier conversation about having a partner is sometimes it's not perfect for how you're feeling, but you've got to figure out a way to Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, and Jalen Hurts in portfolios like a lot of us are carrying. So go for it. And sometimes that 2v2 with a receiver or running back in a later round is not going to pay off. In a redraft league, I'm even more up for that this year because of waivers, because, you know, again, your point about how often they bust and just how safe those guys are. I guess Justin Fields is a little bit less safe, but still the high rushing floor. You mentioned other guys, Watson, Daniel Jones. You want a quarterback in the 10th round? Maybe it's Daniel Jones. He certainly runs. We had Cody Carpentier on the show 2 weeks ago saying that if Anthony Richardson starts in the league, he'll rush for 1,200 yards, like just matter-of-factly. So one or two more guys every year, still hopeful on Lance. But you can't just make it hard and fast rule not to pick a quarterback in round 2 sometimes. Plus in these best ball drafts, of course, Adam, stacking is prevalent. Kelsey teams want Mahomes. Diggs teams want Allen, A.J. Brown, and Devontae Smith, or even Goddard for Hurts. Fields is tougher, where you have to backdoor a little bit. Burrow is easy. So I feel like the equation's a little different in best ball for those guys because of that.
Yeah. And I also feel too that, like, I'm so, like, kind of old school in the sense where I like to wait on quarterbacks. So I just go do super flex, because then you have no choice, right? Like, you have to take the quarterbacks early, and that's where you can kind of get your shares of these guys. Now, if you do a high volume of drafts and you do a high stakes portfolio, like, there's really not many super high stakes, super flex leagues. So you're really not going to be able to get big money in on these super flex leagues. Now, you can do the high volume and you can max out these tournaments and stuff, which is what a lot of guys are doing, especially for best ball. But yeah, when it gets to, like, the big money drafts at the end of August, early September in Vegas, you know, it's going to be tough for me to pull the trigger on these guys in the second round. As much, I mean, listen, no one's a bigger Josh Allen fan than I am, but I just feel like there's some values to be had there at the quarterback position later on.
In the middle, it's interesting. There are some questions. It feels a little bit, last year didn't really work out for guys like Russell Wilson, for one. Even Kyler Murray, right? Like, he eventually got hurt, but still a very bumpy year.
Yeah.
Tua worked out when he was on the field. But, just there were some Lance, of course, some players in that range, Brady, where we felt pretty good in this, like sort of the argument you just laid out. I'm fine drafting those quarterbacks, whatever it was, 7 through 14. But there were a lot of tough ones in that range. Wilson, I mean, maybe there's a bounce back. Rodgers probably on a new team. Murray, who knows when he plays. I feel like the vibe is sort of the other way around. Even Prescott, although Prescott has weapons and just the new offensive coordinator, never really sounds like Dallas gets it. But still, high upside there. You sort of know what I mean? That This year in that mid-tier, last year I think we were all sort of excited, man, all the time in the underdog drafts, all the time with those players and their stacks, sort of more subtle. This year, though, it seems like every one of those guys, there's a little bit of a question mark.
Yeah, and again, a lot, I haven't gotten heavy. I feel like ashamed that I have to say I haven't been heavy into drafting yet in early April. Wow. But that's because
baseball.
I know. Listen, I've been doing them. But a lot's gonna change for me when it comes to the quarterbacks. I mean, guys are teams are gonna draft players, right? I mean, we just said Beckham go to Lamar Jackson, hopefully in Baltimore, right? That changes things. You've got teams are going to be drafting first-round receivers, second-round receivers, stuff like that. So, I mean, that's going to affect kind of where the guys kind of rank out. The schedule, and I don't mean to be like, we kind of know who the teams are going to play is, but we're looking at like we were trying to win the money at the end of the year, right? Who's going to have that cake schedule, that not cake necessarily, but like a high-flying shootout schedule at the end of the year? Like that's going to affect kind of what quarterbacks I rank where, because in most of the leagues I'm playing in, there's these big prizes at the end where I want my quarterback hot weeks, 15, 16, 17. So the schedule to me has an effect on that. So a lot's going to happen in the next month. I'm super excited about that. And so that'll definitely affect my rankings.
On the deep end, Mike Shope with Adam Krautwurst talking about quarterback rankings. We've touched on most of the guys in the top half. Do you want to keep going, or do you want to show an example? And I have one too, of a Superflex underdog draft where it just did not fall right.
Yeah, let me show one that I recently did, because again, these rankings are gonna change. So yeah, here's one that I just did recently. Let me change this here, where I'm like, let me go punt. Let me go punt quarterback here and see what it looks like, and it wasn't great at all. So I had the 7th pick in this underdog Superflex best ball. Justin Jefferson, went 6 straight quarterbacks. So it's not like I wasn't going into this draft planning on it, but then once 6 straight quarterbacks go, I could have gone Lamar. I would have been fine with it, but let me see how this looks. Justin Jefferson, come back around for the people who are listening, not watching. Justin Jefferson came back, went Cooper Kupp, and then came back around and went Devontae Adams. And a lot of times when I do stuff like this, and I know I kind of learned this from Chad Schroeder, one of the greatest high stakes players of all time, who doesn't draft until August. He kind of lets the ADP get set, and then he goes in there and just snaps up value. And I did a lot of that with my players. Now, I can't tell you what the exact underdog ADP is for these guys, but a lot of them, I was just taking the player that fell 7, 8, 9 picks past ADP. And I'll tell you, it was never a quarterback, right? So I just keep taking that value. Kupp wasn't 8 picks past ADP, but he was value. Adams fell. I went Josh Jacobs, he fell. And then eventually you just have to take a quarterback, right? Especially in Superflex. And I went Jordan Love. And listen, I hate this draft. Like I use this as an example of kind of like, I wanted to see what it looked like for $10. Let me take a peek. Yeah. Now you can start 3 receivers in underdog. So Jefferson, Kupp, Adams is sweet. Jordan Love, I wasn't going to go in with another receiver early, but Christian Watson, Jordan Love combo there most likely. So I went with that stack. But my quarterbacks ended up, making a long story short, Jordan Love, Desmond Ridder, Mac Jones, Baker Mayfield. Like, it's ugly, and it's not what I want my Superflex rosters to look like. Now, especially so, and to kind of, I'll let you chime in 1 second here. I just want to say, if I'm going to do something where I'm punting a position, my other positions need to be super strong. Now, you usually don't want to punt quarterback in a Superflex, but if you do, you better have elite receivers, elite running backs, and elite tight ends. I don't have I have elite receivers, I think. Jefferson, Kupp, Adams, Christian Watson with the stack. But my running backs are, Josh Jacobs, Javonte Williams, Khalil Herbert, fine, but not, nothing that I'm super excited about. And then I ended up punting tight end too, Jawan Johnson, Mike Gesicki. So it just didn't end up working out. And it's a nice kind of test to see, and I could do this all again and have the board fall differently and like my draft maybe a little bit more. But I think punting quarterback is the wrong thing to do, believe it or not, in these super flex drafts.
It is hard though. If whatever you said your draft position was, I can top the quarterback room or bottom the room you just laid out. You said Love, Ritter, Mac Jones, and Mayfield, right? I'm going to show you probably worse if you want to put mine up. When it starts, I was drafting 8th here, and when it starts 6 quarterbacks, I just can't do it. It's just Jefferson. I think what happened in this one, I'm team 8, and I might have just done one where I picked Jefferson and just felt like I wanted to try A.J. Brown. And it's sort of similar to what you just said, only different receivers and maybe a worse quarterback room. I'm going to scroll down. You got me, right? It's just drafting in the middle. I was boasting about the flexibility that you have, but you can get caught. When you're on the end, you're not going to have another chance for a while to get a quarterback. So you just do it and you pay that little price in terms of ADP. Here, A.J. Brown, Stephon Diggs, Garrett Wilson. Fine. Maybe I'll get Rodgers, or maybe I was hoping for him on the fourth round turn. That does not happen. Brees Hall, okay. Andrews, Hawkinson was value. Now I'm out on the ocean on a raft. Look at Richardson go in the middle of 6 after Pickett. Garoppolo is already gone. 7, I'm like, there's no quarterback here that works. I'm still empty. Jahmyr Gibbs, Ritter, okay. I got to have somebody, right? I got to have at least one. Ritter, and then all the way down to Sam Howell in 11. This is the deep end, by the way. We're both telling you horror stories. Andy Dalton in 15. I tried to get a stack going in case Dalton plays for Carolina. He probably doesn't play much, if at all, maybe a few games. And then down to Hendon Hooker. That's right.
Yes.
In round 18. So 4 quarterbacks. I probably don't have enough. This is one of those drafts for me.
Yeah, exactly. And this is the type of stuff that, if you want to be, to kind of work on your game, right, to be successful, this is the way to, hey, will this work? Now, this was only one draft. And again, if you're doing underdogs, you're doing a ton of them, right? So you can kind of mess with it here and there and kind of test it out. But that's kind of a way to really see, does this work? Can I build a super team? And that time it didn't work. If you're max entering, you should certainly mix in some punt quarterback builds and try to do a little bit better than that. But or than you and I both did. But it also just depends on the draft room too. A lot of times, a lot of people will go in with their preset, I'm going to punt quarterback, and then all of a sudden, the quarterbacks are falling, and some drafts they're getting snapped up. So I think you need to be practicing, working on your game. And then, after the draft, all these ADPs are going to flip anyways, once these quarterbacks get weapons and lose weapons and all that type of stuff.
I think one thing that happened to me in that draft is that there's rookie fever, and you have now the growing expectation that the 4 quarterbacks could go as early as the top 4 picks. This is something that I've had my mind on for a few weeks.
Yeah.
With the trade for number 3. Now there's more discussion about that, and Indianapolis taking who they get if they don't make a move of their own at 4. And so suddenly Richardson and Levis, not so suddenly in terms of Richardson, but those 2 guys have really moved up. In earlier tournament drafts, Richardson was around the last round for me. I liked the idea because of the athletic profile, and now it's several rounds earlier. Do you have a feeling in general about the rookies, or is there maybe instead one particular outcome you're hoping for? What's maybe a thought you have on rookie quarterback draft strategy?
Yeah, I've kind of given up trying to figure out who's going to take who. That's kind of the major part, right? Is you can spend so much time trying to figure. If that was my job, then I would probably spend more time trying to figure out who's trying to draft who. But nobody knows. I mean, it's just tough. So I think you can go in and doing kind of what you were doing. Like, hey, if this team takes this quarterback, well, let's stack him with these receivers and kind of mix and match it. It's a lot easier to do in a $10 draft right now, maybe than a higher stakes one. But I don't. To me, I just want the dual threat quarterbacks, which a lot of the guys are these nowadays, anyways, to land in a spot where the O coordinator and the coach are going to let them do what they do. We're talking about like, rookie quarterbacks running for 1,200 yards. Cam Newton's rookie year, he had a great fantasy year. I mean, he ran for a ton of touchdowns, a ton of yards. Man, if you're going to rush for 900 yards and 8 to 10 scores as a quarterback, you're going to be a top 12 fantasy quarterback. So a lot of that stuff's exciting. Got to land in the spot where they're going to start right away, to be able to get that type of production. So I think you've been thinking about this a little bit more than I have, which is why you've been able to lock into a lot of these like ideas of stacks and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. Whereas as soon as the draft happens for me, that's when once I see it, I'm going to dive in and really, really attack it.
Well, if you were playing the market, Stroud to Carolina was the betting favorite until a couple of days ago when Bryce Young moved back up after Chris Mortensen's comments. So some of that work might have been for naught if you took too literally the idea that was where we were headed. It could still be that way, but we don't know for sure. Last thing on the quarterbacks for me, and if you want to put the player profiler rankings back up, of course you can. I have them down in the 20s here. The likes of Garoppolo, Mayfield, we're still not to Ryan Tannehill on this list, Mac Jones, to varying degrees, probable starters. Mayfield could play all year. Garoppolo, depending on what those teams do. I guess Kenny Pickett, but for me, there's a little bit more upside with him. How much value is there in these drafts for you where you have two and now you're at the point where this is what's left? I mean, is it worth it? I know there's data on this that's really interesting. Your feeling is what? You feel like you have to have one of these third guys? Better to take a chance maybe on a rookie athlete or even maybe a handcuff than somebody in this caliber? How do you see it?
Yeah, that's where kind of projecting who's going to get drafted where can be helpful. Like, especially now before the NFL draft, like Baker Mayfield is just, he might not even win the job, right? Like he might not even be the starter. So there's no way I'm taking Mayfield now. Garoppolo, I think, is going to be the starter there. Howell, who knows? They could draft somebody. So a guy like Howell, and Howell might be horrific too, as well. Anthony Richardson, I love the idea of him. If you're going to take a third, and a lot of these rookie quarterbacks that are going to be drafted first, second, third. It's the day and age where these guys are starting right away, right? So I trust that those guys are going to start. The Bryce Youngs, the CJ Stroud. I like CJ Stroud as the best quarterback in this class. So he's a guy that I trust no matter where he lands. He'll be the starter, dual threat as well. So yeah, I think it's okay to take a third quarterback here, but it's got to be the right kind of quarterback, a guy that it's pretty much going to be the starter, like a Garoppolo, or a guy that has massive upside, like an Anthony Richardson or a CJ Stroud with his dual threat.
The problem with those veterans is, especially on Underdog, where you so need the big scores later on. Like if you have a team with Justin Herbert and Jordan Love or some sort of combination of tier 1, tier 2, what do you need Garoppolo for? Maybe a better example than Love would be like Tua, somebody like that. I mean, then I want to have a third quarterback. Who should it be? I want to sort of be different, and I want to think about the playoff weeks. And if a team like the Raiders or the Bucs or the Titans is bad, there's no way those veterans are on the field. I mean, probably. Mayfield played out the string for the Rams last year, but, there is where I want to look. I want to get really creative. However that might manifest. That could be a rookie. That could be probably not a handcuff, but just somebody that makes me different, that isn't one of these guys that shouldn't be on the field for teams with only 4 or 5 wins in December. And all those teams are tracking that way. Maybe least of all Tennessee, but I think the Raiders are. I think Tampa definitely is. By the way, I just keep having the same hunch that Tampa drafts Bijan Robinson.
Oh wow. Just a random Bijan thought.
I don't have a good argument, except that they, or what are they right now? Running back, the Rashad White. But I'm still working on the argument. I just keep feeling Tampa for Robinson. It's 18 or 19 in the first round, and I don't know. Are they sharp for you? Are the Buccaneers a sharp team for you?
I don't know. I mean, they have a lot of talent there, but Godwin, Mike Evans,
Yep.
Hall of Famer Mike Evans. They had a lot of injuries last year with the offensive line too. Stuff that, they had, was it Ali Marpet, all pro, retired, and they just couldn't, they couldn't catch a break last year. So I don't know if they're super sharp or not, but if Bijan goes there, I love him. I mean, that offense could be, really, really good if they can get some offensive line help. Senior Football asks, Mike, which round would you adjust in hindsight for your first quarterback? This is probably in reference back to your other draft, and maybe just in general. If you were going to punt, still,
I'll get it.
Would you have gone earlier?
I'll get it. I want to answer this.
He wants to answer it live.
It's a good question. I want to answer this. You can see it now.
Yeah.
Let's see. Well, round one. Maybe round one, actually. I want to consider round one as my answer because I know how the rest of the draft went.
Right.
And I could have had Jackson or Lawrence there and probably should have done that. But it feels gross to pick the 7th quarterback in 8 picks.
I know.
So I think that would probably be it. It wouldn't be 2 for one of the guys on the left when I picked Diggs. It wouldn't be 3 for Rodgers or Lance or Derek Carr. Breece Hall and 4 over. I like Love. Maybe I would have done that, but I don't have a running back yet. And then by 6, I'm just stuck. The second tight end I thought made me different, and now I'm talking about what, adjusting for Jimmy Garoppolo or it would have to be round one. I hope that's not a cop-out answer. I feel like that's the right answer.
Yeah, no. Listen, in Superflex, that's not a cop-out answer. And the interesting thing too is, with the quarterback, like you said, that I don't want to take the 7th quarterback off the board, unless it's a guy that you think like a Lamar Jackson. I think you could see, but it's just I'd rather give me Justin Jefferson or whatever. Let's say you want to do Christian McCaffrey or something and get the number 1 running back that you think, but eventually you got to bite the bullet and go, man, I got to take a quarterback that I don't like as much as this other skill guy. And you're talking about taking your first quarterback in Superflex. You got to take that's just the first one. That's right. The beginning. You need 2 more, especially if you're going to wait that long. So that's a good question. And I felt myself thinking the same thing was, man, if I could go back, I wouldn't say, oh, I should have taken, Cousins in the 2nd. It's like, no, I should have taken Lamar in the 1st and called it a day. I heard you mention Rodgers since this is a quarterback show. I think we're all assuming Rodgers to the Jets. I kind of like Rodgers to the Jets with all the weapons that they have. They're a Super Bowl contender with Rodgers there. My only fear, and this is nothing like analytical or anything like that, is that it's a Russell Wilson type, like how the hell did that happen type situation where all the weapons galore and it just fell apart before it even started. What do you think of Rodgers?
Nate Hackett is a common factor.
That's right. No.
Yeah. Rodgers has had such an amazing career, and it is true that after he was pretty much written off, he had 2 MVP years.
Yeah.
The way people clap back at you if you talked about his being in decline, it doesn't make you wrong. There was evidence that he was. This happened with Brady too. And then there was a resurgence, and there are lots of reasons why that can happen. It can happen physically or just surrounding cast, different things. So it's risky to slide him. Last year made me angry for them because there was this constant thread of how he was not available to teammates, able to work together with some of you have Watson and Dobbs, you had rookies there, this apparent reliance on the Randall Cobbs of the world and guys like that. I mean, the rookie, like Dobbs was talking about how he didn't even really know Rodgers, and Rodgers would complain, but he was never there. I think about that golf match where Josh Allen made a crack about, no wonder Rodgers no wonder you're so good at golf. You don't go to practice. Like at the same time, there was complaining about the lack of chemistry on the team, but also it seemed like he wasn't there. So now you've got a new team with all new players, and he's not there yet, and everybody is talking like he's gonna be. But where is this is where Brady deserved the credit he got. Like, where is the grind? Where is the work? That's not an easy criticism from me because I'm not wired like those guys who are just such hard workers, but I feel like there is a gap there with Rodgers, and that last year it bit him, that he was just not coordinated with his teammates, and I think he was to blame for that. So if that's going to be my argument, it's tough right now for me to think that he'll just walk into a new organization and light it up at another year older, 39. So I'm not out all the way on Rodgers, but I'm not too excited about him.
Yeah. I'd like to see it. If he shows up right after the mini camp, whatever, and says, hey, listen, I got new teammates, new organization, new jersey. I got to show up and prove that, I'm the guy that they traded for. But like you said, I mean, back-to-back MVP seasons. Listen, if you ever feel like you're going in decline, what does that say? That's mushrooms and darkness retreats. That's what you got to start doing. The thing is, I got 3 kids. Darkness retreat. I can't. My wife would be like, "You're going where?" On a darkness retreat. Get back to work. Okay.
It sounds great. Yeah. Well, has anybody ever gone to the Jets to win? Like, I'll go to the Jets. They'll pay me. They'll pay me. I'll play. It'll count. But your legacy really isn't too much on the line. If you win there, you're a god. But it's not like anybody ever does. They have some nice players, but they're not a complete team. Like, I don't know. This could be. I'm really thinking about it. This could be one where you have regrets for not jumping in. I don't want to be afraid of it, but I'm not your guy that's going to tell you that I'm eager to get Aaron Rodgers, and I feel like that could be a pullout quote on a future player profile or tweet. All right. Well, you have a thought on before we go, Beckham and Jackson? Like, you've alluded to it a couple times. You feel like that all but locks in Jackson in Baltimore, or not quite?
I think, I get why Beckham did it, I guess, but Lamar's supposed to look at this 30-year-old receiver that's never ever healthy and be like, yeah, I'm going to stick around now for 5-6 more years. Like, I don't know. I think it'll be fun. Like if they can lock in for another year, great. And if that's the case, absolutely. I mean, every time Mike and I make a big trade, I don't know if everyone knows, every time Mike and I make a big trade, we get on FaceTime all the time and take pictures of each other, just like those two did, those lovebirds. So it's good to see the positivity that it seems like it's having, because but I think they have some more work to do as far as building kind of the trust back up there with Lamar. But man, Mandrews, we're talking about Odell Beckham, Bateman. They could be a problem if they can get their head on straight there.
I think 3 tournament teams at FFPC with Jackson and Beckham coupled, which was a little bit random, but also awesome. Like, Beckham is going to play, and you don't know where he's going, you don't know where Jackson's going. Maybe they end up with each other. So, not that having Jackson on those teams was a huge factor in drafting Beckham. I liked drafting Beckham. He was more than a year removed from the injury, and he's going to play for somebody. Probably a good team, or else he wouldn't sign. Like, I think that was pretty good value in round 15 or 16, whatever it was. Probably not anymore. All right. Well, we're about done for tonight here on the Deep End. Mike and Adam, you can reach us by tweeting at DeepEndFF1, at Shope Talk, SCHOPPTALK, at Adam_Krautwurst, KRAUTWURST. Adam, any final thoughts?
No, that's it. I just can't wait for the NFL draft. I'm excited. That's kind of the kickoff for the fantasy season to me. So we're almost there.
I think next week we're hoping to have Joe Ostrowski on from BetQL to talk draft props and be able to maybe analyze what he knows, and from reading the market every day. He's a super guest and a real expert on it, and then translate that into fantasy. What kind of what's actionable from what the betting market looks like. So hopefully Joe can join us after his Little League baseball practice next week, and we can hash this out. Joe's 12. So
Joe's
he's got
12.
He's got Little League baseball.
They keep getting younger and younger.
He's 12, but he knows a lot. All right. Hope to get some feedback from anybody who watched or listened and enjoyed the content tonight. We'll be back next week, 9 Eastern, here in the Deep End. Thanks for watching and listening.
See you guys.
Hey, you like that video? Be sure to subscribe and activate those alerts so you get notified as soon as new videos drop. And be sure to check out playerprofiler.com. We have all the tools for you to dominate every type of fantasy league. We have a draft kit, Dynasty Deluxe, data analysis, DFS Dominator, and don't forget the player rankings to rule them all.